Welcome to the Dynasty Effect, where the legacy of the Clash of Dynasties docuseries doesn't end, but continues.
This is a podcast that puts it all together, you know?
This is the Dynasty Effect.
Welcome to the Dynasty Effect. I'm executive producer and director Ben Hanna, and with me is fellow cast member, producer, rival, sworn enemy from Walls Jesuit, Frank Favaro. Frank, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. Really looking forward to this guest today. He's a badass. We got a badass on today, so it's exciting.
Oh, 100%. And unfortunately, we don't have Aaron with us, but it's a jam-packed episode, so we're going to jump right into it. Our guest that we're bringing on today is none other than Andy Hrovat. He is featured in the docuseries, but unfortunately, because of his travel, because of his schedule, he's all over the world. We weren't able to get him to sit down and be a part of it, along with many others. I mean, there were hundreds of guys that, were part of this dynasty story that we just weren't able to get down within time. So we wanted to bring Andy on, tell his side of the story, get his perspective firsthand. But Andy, he was a state champ, two-time state champ. He was a national team member. He was a three-time NCAA All-American. He was a 2008 Olympian. Like I said, the only one from St. Ed's. But he was younger than me. I think he was younger than you as well, Frank. So look, when I say Andy Hrovat, what do you think of? What do you know? What's your first thoughts?
I think back to, I remember Andy because we were on the youth wrestling circuit together. So like, I remember him, as a little guy, and I remember him. I remember his dad, and I just remember, and then when he went to Ed's, it was like, oh, wow. Here we go. Now Andy's, on the rival teams. So, but what a great career, a great guy. And I'm looking forward to talking with him.
Yeah. Andy was one of the part of that team that was able to come back and take over the dual meet, the national championship, and kind of left St. Ed's in good hands after, you guys kind of rolled through us. But let's, no further ado, let's bring him on. Let's get right to it. Let's please welcome to the Dynasty Effect podcast, Andy Hrovat.
And Andy Hrovat.
This is Andy Hrovat.
Andy Hrovat.
Andy Hrovat.
Andy Hrovat from Lakewood St. Ed. Second and third in the Cadet Nationals.
A three-time state placer and two-time state champion.
Three-time All-American.
Olympian in 08.
He's also an international coach.
I promise to learn one thing in today's practice. I promise to leave better than I started. I promise to help somebody else do the same. And most importantly, I promise to have fun doing it.
Oh, another takedown for Hrovat. He's just better on his feet. And two more.
Yeah, he's pretty well dominating this match. He's pretty impressive.
Got a little future ahead of him.
Andy's going to be going to Michigan and also have Olympic aspiration.
That'll be it.
Andy. Coach Andy.
Andrew Hrovat.
All right, so let's get started.
Andy, how are you, sir? Welcome to the Dynasty Effect.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How's it going? Where are we finding you these days?
I'm in Dallas, Texas now.
Now, tell us, what are you doing in Dallas?
I have a club, a wrestling club here. It's actually outside of Dallas in a city called Forney, Texas. And to be honest, the strange thing when I came down here, I took the job, and you guys being from up north, and our rivalry. 3 months after being down here, I realized Forney didn't even have a wrestling team. So like, I'm in this city having a wrestling club, and there's not even a high school team in that city, which is wild. Texas is so new, but there's a lot.
It's growing though, right? Texas's wrestling is growing big time, right?
Big time, yeah. So after I found out that they didn't have a team, then I started looking into it. And when I got here 4 years ago, because I was obviously in Ohio my whole life and in Michigan, and there's probably 350 high schools in both states out of 400 that have wrestling. Well, Texas has like 350 high schools that have wrestling out of 1,200.
Wow.
And so it's growing a lot.
That's big time. That's big time. Well, let's step back from where you are now to where you were back in Ohio. Let's start from the beginning. I know I've listened to a bunch of podcasts. You've mentioned a lot of times, you were a youth wrestler, but we've had many guys on this podcast that have come from non-wrestling families. Parents didn't know much about the sport, but yet they ended up being very elite wrestlers. Talk to me about those early days. And I don't think your dad really knew much about wrestling. He wasn't a wrestler.
No, my dad didn't wrestle at all. He went to St. Joe's, grew up in North Collinwood where I grew up. And, no, I got involved because, I was like an active little kid and, I had a January birthday and, he went to sign me up in December for T-ball. And they were like, no, he has to be 5 now. And I was turning 5 in January, like 20 days later. And my dad was like, this is crazy. And, but one of his friends that he knew, was a wrestling coach, and he was telling the guy, and the guy was like, no, just bring him to the gym. And so, he was at Euclid Y when they still had a program. And, that's where I got my start.
Euclid Y. That's where you started. Okay. And you were 5.
5, yes.
5 years old. Now, were you competing off the rip, or were you just kind of practicing and rolling around?
No, competing. Like it's funny. I have like pictures. Like they had like the gym had like they were like I have a couple pictures from the Euclid Y. They had like the little fold out gymnastics mats, and they had like a bunch of them, and they just had like some tournaments, like not tournaments, but like just local, like another. I don't even know who it was because it wasn't West NY. It was just like kids. I have no clue, and but I did it a few times, and then they dropped it. And so I didn't really start competing until I moved over to West NY.
So you were one of the guys on the tail end of Ferguson's run at West End or West Shore?
No, West End.
Okay. So different club than West Shore.
Yeah, different club.
So who was in your circle of competition at that time as far as youth clubs? Was it the CYO? Was it other YMCAs? Where was it?
No, it was mostly all the YMCAs. How Frank started off. I remember him from Kits. And he was such a wiry, like strong, skinny guy. And no, like the one thing I learned from the documentary is like I didn't realize like Bill had been the coach of Walsh, stepped down, started North Akron, because when I started competing, this was probably by the time I got to West End was like 87. And, they had a great program because right around that time, like in 87, I can't remember if it was St. Ignatius or St. Joe's, but I think St. Joe's won the high school state tournament one year. They beat St. Ed's. Yep. And 3 of those guys were from West End, ended up going to like Indiana, wrestling for McFarland at Indiana. Tony Hunter, Bill Spleet, and Scotty Petch. And so West End had a strong tradition, and those kids were really good in high school, and that's right when I started. But eventually, by the time I was like 12, I got too big for West End. Like I didn't have a lot of partners, and maybe a little younger. And then I started going to Longwood, and so I got to see with the North Akron guys, basically my whole life wrestling in the YMCA, and we're going to all the same kids tournaments in Ohio, Pennsylvania, like all over, the Midwest.
So you were with Joey O'Neill around that time? Because he was...
Yeah. Joey O'Neill was there. Obviously he was a little older than me, but yeah, that was kind of cool though, how like, Longwood had kids going to both, North Akron and St. Ed's.
And Freed was Longwood too, right?
Yeah, Freed and Kozicki was there, Bertine was there. That ended up at Ed's.
Okay, that was a little powerhouse. I know it was between when I was doing all the research for the doc, it was always Longwood and North Akron were always the kids that were, in the news.
Well, the craziest thing about that is when I went to Longwood and started wrestling with Kozicki, and he did some CYO stuff too, but I started there with Kozicki, when we were probably like between 10 and 12 years old, and I was with him all the way until I was 29 years old, through little kids, high school, college. When we graduated college together, he started coaching Michigan. I was training there, and then we didn't split until I was 29 years old. We were both 29, but yeah, it was like 15, 20 years of our lives we're together.
That's crazy.
You know what, Andy, thinking about that, like, can you believe we never actually had a duel between North Akron and Longwood? Like, we never had like a dual meet youth. That would have been something, wouldn't it? Just thinking back.
Oh
all the
yeah,
talent
like
that were on those teams. That would have been
it
unbelievable.
would have been good for Longwood.
You guys had some studs, man. Come on.
So, yeah, but I mean, you guys, like, I just remember, like, it was just wild how good North Akron was. Like, I also remember, like, my dad bringing me down there one time for a practice, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, this gym is nuts.
What do you remember?
What do you old Resolite mats? They were hard as a rock, like super thin, just on the laminate floor.
What do you remember from that time? What do you remember from that environment, wrestling those kids? Like, what was your thought going in and maybe coming out of there of like North Akron wrestlers?
They were just fighters, man. They were tough kids. Like, they just fought, and just like how the documentary portrayed it, like, that's real. Like, we would be in tournaments in Pennsylvania and people would hate them. Like, Longwood didn't, even though Longwood was good, we didn't get the hate, but the North Akron kids, because they were just on another level of, like, being vicious, like they would just wrestle hard. And, obviously, like, Adam Plouse and all those, like, it was fun to be around, right? Because it's like, when you look back, it's like, it was a good rivalry, between those two clubs. But, like, even those two clubs were two of the best clubs in the country at that time. And, I look back and just, I'm fortunate to have been on one of the best teams since I was a little kid.
Yeah. What did you first start thinking and know? I think you mentioned it before. It was one of the actually Ed's Walsh dual meets in 94, right? That you went, was it at 93 or 94?
94. So it was really cool though, watching the documentary and seeing like where that ended. I think it was the second one ended, and right before the third one was where my story at St. Ed's came. And, I was, like I said, I grew up in North Collinwood, and I just remember when I was like 12 years old, St. Joe's went co-ed, and my dad was, and I was planning on going there. They had a good team. They'd like won state. And my dad just told me, he's like, you're not going there anymore. And I'm like, it's a mile away from the house. What do you mean I'm not going there anymore? Like, he got the newsletter saying we're combining with Villa Angela. And my dad was like, you're not going there. I'm like, why? He's like, it's not the same school. And I didn't understand that, but in terms of like and I talk about this all the time, in terms of like when Walsh, you see the students were protesting in the documentary about going co-ed, and how fast the sports programs like went down. And my dad knew that right away, like once you introduce the girls, it's like, there's totally different focus. And, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, well, my sister's at Lake Catholic, right? And I was kind of like right in between Lake Catholic and St. Ed's. And Coach Hrovat calls my dad up because they went to high school together. And he was like, yeah, I heard your son's looking for a high school. And he's like, have him come check St. Ed's out. And so I did like the shadow where you go around the school. But Coach Hrovat obviously knew what he was doing. He picked the day that ESPN was there, before that dual meet, right? And so I like show up, and I'd been practicing 7th and 8th grade year with Lake Catholic, and but they had freshmen practicing in a different room, and they had told me we don't let freshmen start. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I just wrestled the freshmen, 7th grade year, 8th grade year, and now I'm going to go back in this high school and wrestle freshmen again. And then I go to St. Ed's. And, I go to the school and ESPN's there, and I'm like, these are two best teams in the country. And I had no clue, there's no internet back then. So I didn't know like how good the teams were, but then ESPN's there, and I'm in the practice room after I shadowed, and I'm working out with the team. And I was just like, this is where I have to go, like this is unbelievable. And, then we had other people that were at, Longwood, Coach Wallace, his son was at St. Ed's, and, he just gave a lot of good advice. He's like, no, just go after it, and he told me, it's like, when you go there, don't take a back seat. He's like, a lot of times freshmen will go into that room and they'll be in one corner, and then all the other older kids are in another corner. He goes, just walk up there and just take ownership of it. And that's literally what I did from day one.
What was it like going in and starting as a freshman? Because at St. Ed's, that typically doesn't happen. You go through the process, you go through the different teams. Right? You were one of prior to you. You think about how like Ben came up, for example, and his brother, right? And you go through the different. You have the gold team, you have the different teams. How about you guys? Like, what was that like coming in as a freshman and starting?
I just didn't think, because like when I was a kid, and Frank, you could attest to this. It's like, being at Longwood and North Akron, you were probably doing 200-300 matches a year. At least I was, right? Like, so from like pretty much 8 years old to 12 years old, I was doing, 200-300 matches a year, right? And obviously that I don't promote that for kids, because not everybody could, stick through it and have that, personality to take that. And so, I had all that experience, and I had no other thought. It's like, I'm going in here, I'm starting. I had no idea nobody started, right? Because before me, it was my freshman year, it was me and Kozicki. But before me and Kozicki, it was Brad Clemens was like, 4 years earlier, he was starting. And then Eddie Jane. And like before that, it was like nobody. So there wasn't a lot of people starting as freshmen at all. And, the craziest thing is, my freshman year was the first year of Ironman. And that was week 2. So we had a quad week 1. And, so Brad Clement is, he was a returning state champ at 140. And, he had told me, he's like, hey, I'm wrestling 45 first week. Right. He's like, I'm going 45. I'll drop down later. But he actually didn't tell me. So this is actually, it's funny that this sticks to me to this day. And so I'm like, all right, so I'll wrestle off at 152. I weighed 145. Like, I probably should have been 140 that year, but that was his weight. And I only weighed 145. So I was like, I'll wrestle off 152. And back then at St. Ed's, you had to do best 2 out of 3 on a ladder, right? And I'm a freshman. So I think I won one wrestle off, 2 matches in a row. This is all same day. So I won 2 matches in a wrestle off. Then I wrestled another person, and I won 2 out of 3. So that's 5. Then I win the next one in 2 matches. So that's 7 matches before practice. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like, I just made varsity at 152. I'm good. And I'm sitting on the wall, and Coach Irvis comes up to me, because we always did our warm up, our drill, 6 matches every day. And he comes up to me, he's like, all right, you pick your partners. You got 6 matches. And I'm like, are you serious? I just wrestled 7. And so then I just wrestled 6 matches. And I'm like, whatever, this is what I do. I wrestle. And after that, it's like, I remember Coach Irv was telling me after that wrestle off, Coach Heff just went up to him. It's like, I honestly don't know how to coach this kid, because he doesn't really do anything like normal, but he's going to be good. But the thing that made me mad about that is they never told me, because they let a senior wrestle 145 at the Ironman. So they all dropped. So Tim Hollow dropped, Brad Clemens dropped. And so I wrestled off 152, and I ended up losing to Tim Hollow for the Ironman. But then I dropped back down to 145, and I was in the lineup the whole rest of the year. So out of all of college and high school, my Ironman, the first Ironman, was the only tournament I didn't get to wrestle varsity.
And what was it like? I mean, you saw that first dual meet in '94 at Walsh, and when ESPN was there for your, and well, not the first dual meet, but your first dual meet.
Well, I actually
what was
didn't
it like
see that match? But
you just saw the cameras. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just saw the lead up to it.
So you didn't even experience Ed's Walsh dual meet until you were actually in it in '95. Right. So what was that like, going into that environment with no real, I mean, we didn't have, I'm sure you guys didn't watch video or anything on the previous years. So you're just going off of, people talking about, well, what was that like leading up to that your first dual meet your freshman year?
Yeah, I mean, it was, obviously it's at the end of the year. So, you get the experience, because we still had a good schedule, and you saw Walsh, like I had wrestled Keith Rawlings at like the CIT tournament. And then, going into that dual meet, but it's like, it's so different when the gym is packed, and, the environment is just crazy, and every match is heated. It was just something special. It's like, because I knew almost every single person on that team just from being kids, and just to see that level. And, to me, like at the time, obviously it's like, this is just normal, right? Because like Santa Heads, Walsh, Longwood, North Akron. And, so it just kind of was like normal at that time. But, looking back now, it not normal at all. It's like, I should have been nervous as hell, but that was just something, like I said, it's like 200-300 matches a year. You just go do it.
And that a 95 Walsh team was unbelievable. They were stacked, for a high school team, and, they had Brent Thompson, Adam Plouse, and Keith Rawling, and Frank Favaro, Sonny Marchetti, Joe Heskett, Jeff Nutt, Joe O'Neill, Scott Overholt, Jamie. I mean, the list went on. Everyone there, I think, won a state title almost, or was in the finals of the state tournament. What did you think when you found out who you were going to be going against?
Well, I didn't really know anything about Keith, and I know he was a North Akron kid, but we had never been in the same weight as kids, and so I didn't really know much about him. But like I said, I got to wrestle him at CIT. I think it was a semi-close match. Ended up wrestling him at least 3 times that dual meet. But, the thing that stuck out to me more was, just the difference where I came from Longwood to North Akron. It's like, man, the Walsh kids, they had the tape on their headgear, like tapes on their hands. It was like they were getting ready for a fight. It's like that's something like they started like a whole trend of like taping your headgear and like tape on the wrist, like just ripping people's faces off. And it's like, it wasn't just wrestling, it was a fight. And it was like, that's, to me, like that set it up and kind of helped me like my whole future, because it's like, you can't just go out there to wrestle, and that's one thing I'm actually talking to my kids a lot about. It's like, at some point you got to just be gritty and know how to fight, because it's a fight. Obviously there's rules, but you can't let somebody, assert their dominance. And that's what Walsh was so good at. And, the dual meet was great. Obviously, we didn't win, but, for me, just having that rivalry that year with Keith, it's like, that set me up for the future, because it's like I lost to him at CIT, lost to him at the dual, and then I go to districts at Menor, and I ended up losing to him, I think, by 2 points, and he actually knocked me out. No, he beat me on the front side, and then I lost to the state champ on the backside by a point. So that my freshman year, I ended at districts where I lost to the state champ and runner-up by a total of 3 points, and it wasn't something that sat well with me, but when I went and I saw them take first and second at state, I knew I was right where I needed to be. And without that rivalry, it's like, people hold you accountable, and that and rivals or best friends, it doesn't matter. And that's what Walsh was. They held you accountable. If you wanted to be the best, like, there was no shortcut, there was no easy way around it.
What was your style, and I saw that match with all your matches really was kind of funky, right? You weren't the most orthodox wrestler. You tried a lot of different things. Describe your wrestling style. How would you describe that?
Yeah, like, especially when I was young, it was really like funky, because, and even looking back at that, it's like, before the 1980s with, North Akron and Longwood, there was just like local leagues and people weren't like traveling. It wasn't until like Howard started like the Super Quad, even in high school. Like, this is the one thing like that's really like downplayed about this, because, obviously Bill started Ironman and created this huge event. And we have all these national events now for high school, but it really started with Ferguson bringing in all those Oklahoma teams and other nationally ranked teams to be like, no, we're going to settle this weekend at the St. Ed Super Quad to see who's the best. And that's like mid 80s. And before that, nobody really traveled like in any sport. Like, basketball teams weren't doing it. Football teams weren't doing it. And Ferguson was like one of the first people in the country. And so, before me, in the 80s, not a lot of people were doing 200-300 matches a year. So it's like, you start learning how to wrestle, and it's like, yeah, moves, but it's like, there's times you just go and you do things. And that's where my style ended up being, where it's like, I could do traditional things, but it's like wrestling 200-300 matches. You just get all this info and data, and you're just moving. And it's like, no, I could do this, I could do that. And you start making things up. And even though like from the outside, people are like, oh, he's just doing crazy things. It's like, but they're calculated, and I've done them thousands of times before.
You had a pretty tough draw with some of the guys at Walsh, but you didn't lose. You only lost one dual meet, and that was to Keith Rawling. The next one, I think you weren't able to wrestle because of the ref. You were supposed to wrestle Heskett, and then you won the last two that you were a part of. What I wanted to do was bring on someone, and from that time, the only guy that's beaten you from Walsh besides Joe Heskett, but we'll get into that later. But we wanted to bring on the Dynasty Effect, Keith Rawling.
You're looking at Keith Rawling.
Keith Rawling.
Rawling.
From Cuyahoga Falls, Walsh Jesuit.
Rawling's another one of these North Acton Wrestling Club members who stepped up to the Walsh Varsity. He's a ninth grader. Rawling's and Rawling is going to win. And he's fired up. Keith Rawling, the champ.
An Akron school teacher.
A doctorate of education.
A two-time state placer, Keith Rawling.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
Keith, how are you, sir?
Fellas, good to see you.
Where do we find you these days?
You say where?
Yeah.
Man, I'm in my sanctuary kind. This is the gym at the school where I usually come every day at lunch, hang out, do a little lifting, get away for a little bit, and then just go back to my task. So this is my normal time, my lunch time. Every day I get a little opportunity to come down to the weight room, hang out, try to pump up my muscles a little,
Thanks for joining us, man. We wanted to
Appreciate
to
it.
create a moment for the guys that, shared this experience together on Clash of Dynasties. And we weren't able to get Andy for an interview for our docuseries, but both of you guys were able to sort of rekindle, re-meet, and see each other at the premieres. Talk to me about that. What was that like? And was that the first time that you had seen each other since wrestling each other back in high school?
I'm pretty sure it was the first time we did really, get back together. But just for sure to let everybody know, I'm sure everybody else knows. I was a fan, watching him go along, and I was doing my thing, which really wasn't wrestling anymore. But watching Andy thrive and succeed and be the man that he is, made me proud, because I was part of that journey and part of that whole deal, building him up and making him who he is. Yeah, to this day, right now, I'm real proud of my opportunity and my role with the Clash of Dynasties story and what all came to be.
And Andy, what was that like for you to see Keith again?
Oh man, it was awesome. I got to see him on that first night, and then we did that clinic at St. Ed's, and he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, if you don't mind, could I be your partner today?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that's amazing." And so when I got to work with the kids and stuff, I got to work with Keith and demonstrate with him, and that was so cool to be able to do all that. And even though it was a rivalry, it's like we all still had respect for each other, and like I said, some of my biggest memories are losing the Walsh guys, and that just like what Keith said, it forged and made me who I am. And, if it wasn't for those losses, it's like I said, you have to have those people that push you. And I was so grateful to have that dynasty and the rivalry to, push me to new levels, and so, like I said, it was amazing.
Andy, what's one thing you learned about Keith during Clash of Dynasties experience? And Keith, what's one thing you learned about Andy during the experience? I'll go. I appreciate it. He talked about his role, and now he's working with the women's wrestling, and I thought that was fascinating. Well, really something that hit me was, I was there in the experience and looking at the kids and having fun myself, just wrestling around. I kind of hit on it when we were there that day, just looking out, watching the kids, look at Andy and watch him and really take in it. This is the guy standing right here. It was surreal for me. surreal for these young people, seeing the champ up there demonstrating some moves and right there in person just to talk to, look at, check out and examine and just kind of measure themselves up to what the real deal looks like. So that was really awesome and really fun. And just everybody that was part of it was great people and good to see everybody.
That's awesome. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, just watching the documentary, just you mentioned it earlier. There was no VHS. There was, but it's like you didn't use it to scout and do all that stuff. And I was going into that first dual meet with Walsh and even like the CIT and all the other stuff. I had no idea what Keith's history in that was, or anybody else for that matter. So it was really cool being able to watch the documentary to see it, how big of a part Keith was in the year before, in that when I was in 8th grade and when I was shadowing St. Ed's, and it was just really cool because it's like I said, I went into freshman year not knowing anything. It's like I believed in myself and I knew what I was capable of doing, but I had no idea about the rivalry or who was involved in it, at the high school level. Right. I didn't even know who was winning state titles, because you didn't even get that information back in the day. And so, that was one of the cool things. And then, obviously the next year I jumped up a weight and he was still there and, beating St. Ed's kids. But yeah, it was just really cool just to see how everything leading up to that, to my first year happened.
And Keith, does it make you feel proud when you think back to that you were able to beat a future Olympian, when you look back at that match and, I think he was the last only dual meet loss that Andy ever had against Walsh.
Hey, all good. Andy's the man. And we'll talk about that. And that's nothing new. We all know that. We're talking real about it. The time when it was the duel, it was kind of my time to shine. And Andy was a freshman. And so truthfully, I didn't have any thought about losing because this was a freshman and I was supposed to be a representation of what we were trying to do. So I know he's the great legend, and I probably was lucky for me that I got him when he was still a young man, because the time when we wrestled, it was really my time, my time to show off and my time to be an upperclassman. So again, I just feel like I'm lucky to get him at the time I did, when he was a young man and I had the little upper advantage as far as experience and a little couple years of age. And that was the only difference right there.
Well, I found that match. We showed a little bit of it, just a second of it in our docuseries, but I'm going to play the whole thing for you now. And I want to, you guys can go back and forth. Tell me what you're thinking. I chopped it down a little bit. So let's load that up real quick. What are you thinking about that crowd size? Oh, there we go. Ooh.
I didn't remember that.
No, I just remember being like, this is different. Kids were not strong like him.
Hey. You remember that, Keith?
No, I can talk about some things I remember for sure, but now that wasn't one of them.
What do you remember from this atmosphere?
One thing I do, lots of things I remember, but one thing you can see just obviously is that Andy was right about to hit the strength spurt. The next year he was much bigger. You know what I'm saying? So he was right there, and that's what I mean. I had a little advantage because I was older. You can just see that I was just a little bit older, but obviously I wasn't that much more skilled. So I just had a couple years on him, and I was lucky to have that. Some things I remember about the match, honestly, is how I felt at the end of the stretch, because I had the lead, and I knew I had to finish strong. So I was thinking about if I was going to share this or not, but I think I probably should. Near the end of the match, I'd say third period, I took a little break, You know, it was obviously a faker. You know, I act like my shoes untied, something. I hit my balls, something. I did something. But I remember the boo I got was substantial. I mean, I got booed through my skull. But honestly,
Right here.
it motivated me.
I think it
motivated me.
happens right here.
Keith, you're losing here. That's, if I'm score's correct, 5-4. Is that what I'm seeing? Are you? Is that the
Here
score?
it is.
5-4.
This might be where I do it.
Oh, the knee.
I guess it was a knee. I needed. This is true. I'm talking real in real time. I needed to collect myself, and I remember doing this, and I remember being energized in my heart, like there wasn't no thought of losing in my mind right now. I had to clear my webs out, and that's what I did. And then I went down there and got the win. And I remember that very vividly, how it felt and how I knew that I needed to take a minute here, regain what I had to do, and then go ahead and get the win. And that's what I did.
Andy, what's going through your mind at this point when you had a lead on him?
I mean, I don't remember this match per se, but you know, obviously he's, you know, taking me down pretty easy. You know, for me, the biggest match for Keith and I that freshman year was in you know, the districts, you know, because that was the biggest match for me, you know, because that, you know, determined if you go to the state tournament or not. You know, and I also lost to him twice before, you know, CIT, this dual meet. But you could just tell, like, he's a stronger, more mature, and, you know, he put it on me. As you can see here.
Did you feel and see, Keith, Andy's funky kind of style? You know, you're trying to do a lot of rolls, trying to do a lot of, you know, throughs like that.
No, I didn't. Man, what he's saying is just what I mean. I'm sure you guys can remember too. We didn't do much thinking about going ahead. You know what I'm saying? It was just time to go out there and do it. You just went out there and did it. And this is my opponent, and this is my first time getting to know him. And I can really recall though, after the match, how it was because I had a real respect for him. You know, it was a real match that we just went through with this freshman. You know what I mean? And so I remember, and his dad was always a staple at the matches, and my dad was too. But I remember we were all kind of like, you know, not real friendly, because you know how it was. It wasn't a real friendly talk, but it was my dad, me, his dad, him. And it was kind of in the hallway outside the mat. And I was talking to his dad saying, man, he's going to be a real tough dude. Like thinking to myself, like, damn, glad I made it through that one. You know what I mean? This tough freshman. But his dad, man, it seems like it's like gets me near emotional now. His dad showed so much respect to me. Like looked at me like I was a grown man and like told me congratulations, you know, because he knew his son was the man, and he knew he took a real dude to beat him. And when I got the win, that's what I'm saying. His dad recognized that he provided a great deal of respect to me and made me feel like, yeah, I am the man right now, you know, and I was, because I beat the champ. So that was the real thing.
You know, I had a lot of respect for both of your fathers. And what's one lesson that you can go back to that you've learned from your dads? Maybe you use it now. Maybe it's in your coaching. Maybe it's in your teaching, Keith. Maybe it's being a parent. But one lesson that you use on a daily basis that you learned from your fathers.
Oh, go ahead, Andy, or I can go. Go ahead, man.
I mean, I'm not going to say it's like on a daily basis. And I was actually thinking about this, you know, before, you know, leading up to this podcast yesterday. You know, one of the things I see at my club, it's like the kids who succeed the most have the most support by their parents, right? And, you know, I look back at, you know, Longwood, you know, North Akron, St. Ed's, Walsh. And, you know, the thing that stuck out to me the most when I was thinking about this yesterday is like how supportive our parents were. You know, it's like every, you know, from Sonny to Keith to you, Frank, and, you know, obviously Ben with your dad. It's like, you know, these parents put so much into us, taking us all over the country and, sacrificing so much for our success. To me, that's the biggest thing. And, I also saw it with Coach Irvis, and as a coach, that's what I thrive to do for my kids. It's like, I want to show up and be there for them. Right. And I want to support them no matter if they're going through a hard time or, because you guys, being both of our programs, it's like, there was tragedies at St. Ed's and at Walsh. And, if you didn't have that support and that community, none of those teams would have been the way that they were. And, that's the thing that sticks out the most, is just the general support our parents all had for us.
Keith, what about you?
I appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. I think my dad was a real man, just like typical how you're supposed to go about your day. You're supposed to work hard, be respectful to people that respect you, and just always show your best side every day, day after day. Consistency. My dad was a tough dude, and he expected that from me. And although at the time it was difficult, now, reflecting back, I am who I am because my dad was who he was.
And Keith, before we say goodbye to you, I know you got to get to class soon. Talk about, what did you learn about yourself through this journey of looking back through Clash of Dynasties that you maybe didn't know before, or you knew when you reflected back on these years?
I think this is, I appreciate this opportunity. I spoke with, communicated with Hada yesterday about this a little bit. Like you, Andy, I was thinking about the podcast a little bit, man. I got this little weight room at home, and I got some of my memorabilia up. One thing that's not up, like not displayed proudly, but just over there in the corner is my state tournament, the bracket sheet when I got second. So they give you that when you're the runner-up. Like I said, it's definitely not my prized possession, but it's in there among my memorabilia. And I was looking at it yesterday and reflecting on it and reflecting on my experience through the Clash of Dynasties. The one thing I've been thinking about, in my own head, just while I'm going through my days, is that's one thing that really shaped me as a person. Those 2 years I was close. I was right there to win the title. My junior year, lost by 1 to the dude I beat the week before by 1. My senior year, double overtime, lost 2-2. It was like, you couldn't be any closer. I failed. And they no other, that's it. Bottom line, end of the day, I didn't get it done, and it devastated me. Obviously, it's been 30 years. I'm still hurt. But I just know, and I really, really considered this, just looking at it from all the time with the Clash of Dynasties, man, that whole thing made me who I am. I mean, since that day, I've been hanging out with Frank, looking at all my buddies, their lives, and I wanted to be the one that was the best at everything. Everything I did, working out, this whatever job I had, going to school, all A's. I want to make sure that it's real clear to everybody around that Keith Rawlings is the champ. Ain't no runner-up over here. I'm the champ. And that's something that it fueled me always, like, damn, I was there. I should be the champ. I am the champ. So I think just since that time, I've always worked to just make sure there's no doubt about it that I'm the number one, and that's what I just try to put out there and just do my best to always be as best as I possibly can be.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing.
Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You are a champ.
Man, you guys are all champs.
You're star of the documentary.
Tremendous opportunity for me, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, man, all you guys, for everything you've done to help me and being around. And this has been an awesome experience for me. I appreciate you guys a great deal.
Before we say goodbye to Keith, anything else you want to say to Keith, Andy?
No, I mean, like I said, just jumping into the rivalry and, having those matches. And to be honest, one of the things I always preach to my kids, whether it was coaching at the Cliff King Wrestling Club or my current club, Ranger 47, I was telling them, I said, the things that you have to be grateful for are the wrestlers you get to wrestle multiple times, right? If you just wrestle somebody one-off, it's like you don't know how you're improving, right? But like I said, I wrestled Keith at CIT, then I wrestled him at that Domi, and I got, 14-8. then I make it all the way to districts, and he beat me, I think, in the semis or quarters of districts, and that match I think was a 2-point match, and so it's like I saw that improvement, and obviously he was continuing to improve and working to get a state title, and it's like I had to do that because he was beating me. Right. And, that's the number one thing is like, actually, to be honest, like, this is crazy. Right. Like, my first couple of years here, one of the kids I was training wrestled this kid like 5 or 6 times in high school. And I think he beat him twice at the blood rounds of the national prep tournament. He beat him in local Texas tournaments. And I told him, I said, win or lose this, because I was just talking to him and his dad on the phone before he wrestled him his last time at the prep nationals in the blood round. I said, win or lose, I said, go up to him and thank him. I said, he's making you better. I said, win or lose, it doesn't matter. Right. And you're going to be better because of that. And that's exactly what happened with Keith. It's like, obviously I wanted to win, but win or lose, he made me better because I had to get to the standard that he was setting. Right. And that's what Walsh and Ed's, dynasties did for each other. They held each other accountable. Like, if you want to be the best, you got to beat us. And to beat us, you got to stay the path, and you have to believe it, and you have to live it. Right. And Keith just talked about living it. Right. It's like most people don't have that discipline to live that. And, I'm just so grateful for the rivalries with him and Heskett and, some of the other people, eventually in college with Spada. And, I look back, they made me who I was. Right. And, I'm just so grateful and thankful for that opportunity to compete against them.
Well, I'm thankful and grateful that, Keith, you could take some time out of your busy day to join us and share your emotions and perspective on that dual meet with Andy. And good luck the rest of your day. Have a great one, man. Be safe out there.
Hey, you guys have a great day. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for coming on.
I'd really like to get together sometime, anytime when you're around.
Absolutely.
Great deal, brother. You guys have an awesome day.
Thank you, Keith.
See you, brother.
So, Andy, thank you for taking part in that. I know watching sometimes a loss is not always the greatest, but like you said, that's what you learn from, right? It's not the wins necessarily that you're learning from. It's those losses. But you also mentioned briefly there that you, I think, might be the one St. Ed's wrestler that's wrestled the most Walsh guys out there. You wrestled Keith. You had a rivalry going back and forth with Heskett the next year. You ended up wrestling Svita in college. I think, did you wrestle Nup as well?
Yeah.
And then you also wrestled Malika.
Internationally,
right? Yeah. I mean, no, but this goes back to Longwood, North Akron. It's like, I know I wrestled Marchetti as a kid. And here's the crazy thing is I wrestled Heskett when I was a kid and pin me with a cradle. I wrestled them my sophomore year in high school, pin me with a cradle in the districts. We didn't do the dual meet, but you pin me with a cradle in districts, pin me with a cradle in the state finals to get the record. And then, obviously I went up a weight and, so we weren't even in the same weight in college, but I qualified for the world team trials my junior year of college. And, I was kind of small when I qualified. I qualified at Pan Am's, and I had wrestled Romero in the finals of Pan Am's. And I was like, I can't go to the trials if I qualified and wrestled this weight class. I'm tiny. And so I dropped down to 74 kilos. And that was the first year that college kids were allowed to get paid for the national team. And I'm like, I got Heskett, right? And it was a competitive match all the way up to the end. Boom, gets cradle, pins me. And I'm like, from the time we were kids, every single match, this guy pinned me with a cradle. And it's like, oh, that was crazy. It was like, and then I was in the thick of it, right? Because that same year, Spada beat me for third at NCAAs, right? So it's like I lost for third at NCAAs to Spada. I lost for third at the national team to Heskett. It's like I couldn't escape those Walsh guys.
And we talked about their all-star team that they had, but when I look back on it, it was more of a high school all-star team with Heskett and Nup and Marchetti and Frank and Keith and Brent and all those hammers that they had. But you were on an all-star team. I mean, and that all-star team went on to produce national All-Americans and champions, and obviously an Olympian. You were with you and Gray Maynard and Yoshi and Bertine and Mason and Mason Leonard and Mark Jane and Nick Nemeth, who was, I think, lost in the blood rounds that year. And I mean, they were from that team as well. I think it was like 15 NCAA All-American titles or awards.
No, I think it was more. I think it ended up being 18.
18.
Because you weren't including, I don't think you're including me, because it was Yoshi had 3, I had 3, Gray had 3, so that's 9. Kozicki had 1, that's 10. Bertine had 4, so that's 14. And then Mark Jane had 3, so that's 17. So there was 17 NCAA All-Americans on that team. And then Nemeth was the round of 12, and Tolar didn't start till later, and he was round of 12.
And that was that same group where in one year at the NCAA tournament, there were 3 guys from that group. They're in the same weight class, the All-American.
Yeah, they had 3 All-Americans in the same weight class, and I believe that same year they had a round of 12 guy too.
Yeah, and so that's out of the top 8, almost half of them were from one school, one class.
Yeah,
basically.
it's crazy.
And then you've always kind of been on sort of all-star teams in a sense. Even when you went to the Olympics, you were with Cormier and Askren and Cejudo. And what was it about, those guys? A lot of those guys went on to go to do MMA. Why did you ever have aspirations? Was that something you ever, toyed with? Why not?
I always tell people, because I'm pretty. I didn't want to get this. I didn't want to get my face pounded. No, I just loved wrestling, and I just think that 08 team had so many people, because that's when MMA was, first starting. Obviously Mako went on to fight a little bit, and now he trains, some of the best fighters, at American Top Team in Florida, and obviously Cormier, double champ, Cejudo, double champ, Askren, won Bellator, won FC, and late got, after a hip replacement, got to fight in the UFC, but yeah, it was just something I wasn't interested in. I liked it, I liked watching it, because of Gray, and just meeting some of those people, but it wasn't something that interested me. And, I was just more into the wrestling.
When did wrestling start to click for you? Because obviously it took you a little bit to build on the St. Ed's team, up to the to win a state title your junior and senior year. But you never won an NCAA title, Where was it when things were like, was it in high school? Was it in grade school? Was it in college? Where along that ladder to you becoming an Olympian, where things really like, I think I can do this?
Man, like, talk about roller coaster, in the 80s, the top tournament in the country was the AAU Grand Nationals. They didn't have the Tulsa for the kids. USA was just being formed in 84 when they split with the AAU. But when I was a kid, the AAU Grand Nationals was still number 1, right? And I was able to win that twice as a kid. So I had success. But then, you go up and down. And, I was actually talking about this yesterday to some parents, because I have kids dealing with the same issues. It's like, when I was a kid, I wrestled 200-300 matches a year, like I said, and I was winning national stuff, and I was doing really well. But then I started to, really struggle. I started, getting taller and being in different weight classes and being awkward with my body, and things weren't always working. And, my 7th grade year, I didn't do a lot of wrestling at all. I was just training with Lake Catholic's high school team, the freshmen. And in my 8th grade year, I was just going to do the same thing. But the coach was like, well, you should at least do the CYO league. I'm like, I go national. I went from a national schedule, 200-300 matches, to just doing local CYO stuff. And I remember going to St. Ignatius my 8th grade year at the CYO city tournament, and I didn't even place. Right. And I just remember being devastated. Like, I went from winning all these matches as a kid, and not even placing at the CYO tournament in the city of Cleveland. And Coach Silvestro came up to me, and I remember to this day, he came up to me and my dad, and he was like, no, you're going to be good. Just things happen, and he's like, at that point I was already committed going to St. Ed's. And, But that never deterred me because even though I didn't place in the city tournament, I was like, no, I'm still going to go to St. Ed's. I'm going to start, I'm going to be, because I didn't know any different. Right. And, I was able to, incrementally get better in high school, went from not qualifying as a freshman, losing to the state champ and state runner up as a freshman. But it was the volume of my wrestling that really did it. Right. That helped me because, obviously after freshman year, I lost to state champ, state runner up. Then I went to Fargo. And actually it wasn't Fargo. My freshman year was the last year cadet and juniors were split. So I went to Nebraska and I lost in the blood round of Greco. I lost in the blood round of freestyle to the eventual champ because that was a pool system. And then I went to junior Greco and I lost in the blood round of junior Greco. Right. So I had all these failures. It's like failed to go to state, failed in Nebraska twice, failed in Fargo. In Fargo, I lost to a 4 or 6 time junior national champ, one of the Woods brothers from Oregon. And so then I go into my sophomore year and it's like, man, failure. It's like, but I'm right there. I'm knocking on the door. And then that year I ended up second and losing to Joe. And then I go my sophomore year, take second in freestyle at Fargo, take third in Greco. And I was like, okay, now I'm on the path, right? And then you start doing well. And then you come down a little bit. And, I had up and downs in college, but I was always really competitive. And, I just stuck with it. And then, like I said, it was the volume. After I made the Olympic team, one thing that stuck out, Kevin Jackson came up to me and, he congratulated me on making the team at the trials. And, he just said, he said, when I look at our team, he said that the 3 guys that wrestled the most the last 4 years between 04 and 08 were me, Cejudo, and Tommy Rollins. And, I thought that was pretty interesting that he noticed that because I literally did. I was like, I'm going to everything I can, just like when I was a kid. I'm going to learn. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to have failures. And, it all came together because of that volume that I was putting in. And which was also pretty cool, too, because, Tommy and I had a long-standing rivalry as kids, just to see him have all that success, too. And, and like I said, just having all that success with everybody. I've told people this before. The 2 hardest matches in my life were the third match of the Olympic trials and my fourth place match, my blood round match, my senior year against Feta. He beat me junior year to take third. Cormier was second. Sanderson was first. And then it was him and me. But the next year we both had bad tournaments and we met in the blood round. Right. And I just remember crawling off the mat wrestling Victor. And it's like, I wasn't going to lose to him. It's like he had beat me like 3 times in a row. Then I started beating him like 3 times in a row. And I think that was our last match. So it might have ended up like 4-3 me or 3-3. But I won that last match in a blood round of NCAAs. And, that just wasn't like for pride or college. It's like, man, this is a long standing rivalry between Eds and Walsh. And it's like, that's literally to me, the second or first hardest match like I've ever wrestled in my life. And it was part of the rivalry in college and high school. And, it just, in that match, literally, again, it made me who I was. It's those rivalries and, the ups and downs and just being able to persist and stay the path and be like, no, I know I can do this. Right. And if you choose to do something, but you don't want to go through the process to set yourself up for failure by choosing opponents that are going to beat you, it's like, well, then you're not ready for that, what you want. Right. And having the Walsh kids and, obviously myself, we all wanted to be great. It's like, you couldn't ask for a better environment to flourish under.
Yeah, that's so. And Victor was the hardest working person I've ever been around in my entire life was Victor Svita in a wrestler. Like nobody ever outworked. I don't, a lot of people don't maybe know that who haven't wrestled with Victor, but he was an absolute machine. And, he flourished when he got to that next level and he was beating you. And then you started winning back on him again, getting in it, to your point, like those, when you get those people you get to wrestle with 5 or 6 times, right? There's nothing better. Like, what a gift to be able to have that, and an even greater gift to walk out to be the final match you wrestle, to be the one victorious, right?
Yeah, well, and you said it, right? Like, I know Victor worked really hard, and but Ben just asked, like, kind of where that moment hit, and it wasn't just the volume. Now that you mention it, it's like, after my sophomore year of college, Joe McFarland was like, no, go out to the Olympic training camp, and train with those guys for 2 weeks, and they're doing their preparation. And I get out there, and Victor's coach is on the team, right? Like, Burton made the team. Charles Burton made it, and he was coaching at Indiana. And so I go out to training camp, and Victor's not there, but I am. And, so I'm out there, and right away, Burton was like, no, I know you. I like you. I want you to be my partner. I literally went with Charles every single day of that camp. And because I had a style at that point that was good for international, and, I could turn and score a lot of points. And I just remember him just grabbing me every day. And, obviously Slay that year beat Joe Williams, and Joe thought he was a, favorite to win the Olympics. So when he goes to camp, Joe didn't want to participate in the camp. And so he was doing his own practices with Tom and Terry Brands afterwards. So I would go through a practice with Charles, and then Tom and Terry were like, hey, we need a partner for Joe. And I'd be like, all right, cool. Like, and then I would do a second practice. And then I would come back and do another one with Charles. And then I would do another one with Joe. And at that point, I was like, I just said to myself, I said, no matter how hard Victor works, I was like, he's not here at this camp. His coach is picking me. And I'm literally going with him every single day. And so the next year, even though he was still beating me my junior year, I was on the treadmill. And I just remember being in Michigan's facility. And I didn't do a lot of running, but I would just go in on my own a little bit, and I would just get on a treadmill, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm looking at myself, and all I could think, because the whole weight room had mirrors, right? And it's like weird, right? But I'm on this treadmill, and I'm looking at myself, and I would catch myself. I'd look up, and I'd be like, all I could think about is Victor. It's like, this guy's not beating me. It's like, even though he ended up beating me that year, it's like, I got him. It's like that, and it just pushed me and pushed me. And, again, it's wild that my Olympic journey had so much to do with the St. Ed's Walsh rivalry.
And talk about, too, I mean, we got a few more minutes with you here before we got to let you go, but you're now in Texas. You're doing the Ranger 47 Wrestling Club. You talked a little bit about the style of wrestling that you used to do as a youth. You're training all ages, even I think some Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys as well. Where do you think kids need to start? Like, what age do you think they need to start wrestling? There's guys, and we talk about it in the series about guys who went through St. Ed's program, me being one of them, that didn't start wrestling until 8th grade, and we were still able to find success by the time we graduated high school. But things have changed. Styles have changed of coaching. As a coach, especially of youth, where do you feel when you talk to parents that a kid needs to maybe start or get serious about the sport of wrestling in order to have maybe some success in high school that gets them into college, that then, at some point maybe can get them on a national team? Do you believe that they have to start at a young age?
I mean, there's pros and cons, right? Obviously I started when I was 5 and had that crazy schedule, but I also saw a lot of people that did that and didn't ever make it, right? And the people I worked with, they had a club before, Team Monday, and they had all these kids winning Tulsa and this and that, but not a lot of them ended up going to college and doing anything. And so it's a give and take. And so for me personally, if you're under 5th grade, I don't mind them competing as long as they're strong, right? Because you can't have a strong mind if you don't have a strong body, right? And I truly believe that. And so if you're strong enough, I'm like, yeah, go ahead, work on it. But the real work is between 5th grade and 8th grade. And, I always tell my parents, if I could get them 5th grade through 8th grade, they could be ready to win Fargo as a freshman, state as a freshman. Anything before that is good because it just teaches you how to move, teaches you how to compete, but it's not, you don't get a long-term memory until you're 8 years old. Right. And so it's like between 8 years old and, 12 being in like 5th grade, it's like, yeah, those are good years, but they're not the most important years. And to me, the most important years are 5th through 8th grade. And that'll set you up for a good high school career, and part of it's the mental part, like it's not the physical toll. It's not because, 10-year-old kids are not hurting each other. They're not strong, they're just wrestling. But it's the mental. It's like, how do you deal with kids losing, because I have a 7th grader right now. He hasn't hit puberty. Every single kid he's wrestling is 6-7 inches taller and jacked. And I'm like, dude, like I've been there, it's like, don't worry about your wins and losses. Just get better at wrestling. You still have another year and a half before high school. And if you could really get the kids to focus that age group, they'll be, better for it, because you don't want a lot of psychological problems of competing too much and, making everything a national tournament and everything's pressure. And it's like, I've already dealt with that here in Texas. It's like kids get like paralyzed by that pressure. And it's like, they're just trying to game and win, right? Just to win, where it's like, no, that the point is to get better as a wrestler and just let it fly. So when you really get into tough situations later in your career, you've been there, right? But if you just keep everything closed off just because you want to win, you're never really going to experience real wrestling.
Andy, I mean, when you say that, is that your deeper purpose today, or is it something else?
No, 100% is my deeper purpose.
Okay.
That and, just making sure people have a good relationship with their parents and family. Because again, I mentioned that earlier. It's like, no, the support the parents have is critical. But, I had a kid and a dad, and the dad was just like, kind of like my dad. Like my dad didn't know he wasn't a wrestler, and, and he did his best, but like he wasn't always the best, right? Because like he's hard on you, and it's like, you're devastated because you lost. I'll stop crying. It's like sometimes you just need to be comforted. It's like, it's like kids. It's like I never question the kids who want it, because it's like if you're choosing to be the best in the country, even at a young age, it's like I'm not going to question if you want it, but it's the after the losses that are the biggest thing. Because if there becomes a rift in the parents and the kids, it's like what's the purpose of this sport, right? It's like you want to be able to look back and be like, no, I had great memories with my dad, right? Even though he didn't always know what he was doing, but like he was always there for me and he always showed up. And he cared and he loved me. And, that's the number one thing I want from my wrestlers, because I recently had a high school kid, he was ranked number 1, he lost. And, his mom was like, oh, he wasn't so nice to me after his loss. And it's like, she's like, I don't want that to be the case. And it's like, no. So I sit him down, I talk. It's like, no, it's like he lost again. It's like, just be nice to your mother, like she's doing her best, she wants you to win. And, so I always tell everybody in my gym, from day one, I said, my number one, I was like, I don't care about how good I'm going to get you. I don't care how nationally ranked you're going to be. I want you to have a good relationship with your parents and your family, because nobody makes it through this life in this journey, especially in the sport of wrestling, without having the people there to support you. Right. And you guys actually played the pledge that Jay Kerber and I came up with for the training system in the beginning. The pledge is to learn, to improve, to help others, and to enjoy doing it. And the reason we put help others, because, a sport like wrestling, you can't just do it on your own, right? You have to have your training partners. You have to have your coaches. You have to have your parents. And nobody wants to give to the kids that only take, right? So if I could get my kids to be like, no, I'm helping him. This is a new kid. I'll help him out. And, like I said, that is my purpose, in this sport, is to get people to give back, because the more you give back, and I learned that from Urbis, the more you give to others, the more people will give to you. People would run through a brick wall for Coach Urbis and Coach Barger, and because it's what they gave to you, right? And they gave to Walsh, they gave to Eds, and so people would do all that back, and that's why I always say, the Brands brothers are two of the best coaches in the country, right? Because, they may not always get what they want with the standard of Iowa, but their wrestlers loved them and their wrestlers would do anything for them because of the way that they give to their wrestlers. The wrestlers know, like, my coaches will do literally anything for me, you know, and I saw that with Terry Brands at the Olympic level. And, you know, I'm grateful for him. You know, one of the things going into that third match in the Olympic trial, it's like, you know, Terry Brands saw what I was doing, you know, the last 4 years, you know, leading up to that. And, you know, I just won that second match, and I turn around, it's like a 15-minute break between my second and third match. This is my sixth match of the day. And I'm in the back. I'm like, all I have time for to do is have a sip of water, change my single color, and get out there. And Terry Brands is just doing this, like, mental heart. Like, he's looking at me just pacing. And it's like, man, like, I just saw what that guy did for everybody at the senior level. And it's like, he poured so much into me and everybody else. It's like, that has nothing but confidence to give you, right? And when people pour so much into you, it's like just that confidence that, you know, it's my time to shine, you know, and you know, that's what I want to do for my wrestlers. And, you know, that brings me the most joy. It's not seeing them win, you know, it's just, you know, obviously seeing them win and do well is great, but it's, you know, just seeing them be good people and have opportunities and, you know, just create the community that we're creating down here.
Nice. And I think Texas needs someone like you, someone with the experience. They need to grow that. I know Slay, Brandon Slay, a teammate of mine, was from that area. He's down, I think, in Arkansas now, but the South wrestling is starting to sprout, you know, and it's great to see, you know, and that strength, that knowledge being spread across the country. Before we let you go, I wanted to do a couple things that we do on most of our episodes. We want to get into who would you say is on your Mount Rushmore?
All wrestling, or like St. Ed's Walsh, or
anyone you want. You got 4 faces you could put on this mountain, or as Shane said, maybe 5. But who are your people that are on that mountain?
Man, I mean, 3 of them are really easy because when I got to college, I watched hundreds and hundreds of hours of these people. Sergey Belglazov, definitely on that list. Actually, I was fortunate, you know, he coached me and he just came and did a clinic for me over Christmas break, 3-day clinic. But, you know, he was a 6-time world champ, 2-time Olympic champ. So Sergey, and then Arsen Fedzayev, was I think a 5-time world champ, 2-time Olympic champ. And he was, I loved watching him. And then Dave Schultz, I watched, you know, hundreds of hours of Dave Schultz. You know, those 3 I watched over and over again in college, you know, not because I wrestled like them, but because they were champions. And I picked up little things like how they carry themselves, how they walked back to the center of the mat, like how they were scoring, like, oh, I just scored, I'm going to come back and score again, not let that other person come back into the match. So those 3 are, you know, 3 of my favorites of all time. And then, you know, I don't know, there's another one that I really like to watch, same era on the Soviet team, Maharbek Kadartsev. Nobody knows him, like, not at all. Like, have you ever heard of him, Ben?
No, I know all 3 of your top 3, but
Maharbek Kadartsev was obviously the 3rd best on the team with Sergey and Arsen. But he was the 7-time World Olympic champ. Then he took bronze, and then he took silver 3 times in a row, lost to the same Iranian in 94, 95, 96. So he was a 10-time World Olympic finalist, 7-time champ, and nobody even knows who he is. But talk about a hammer, you know, like, I love watching his stuff. And, you know, when I lived there, I was fortunate enough, I got to meet him. I had many meals at his restaurant, and, you know, it was just like, for me, like, starstruck, you know, like, yeah, this guy who's just tore the world up for a decade, you know, 11 years, you know, he's got 11 World Olympic medals, 10 finals, 1 bronze. And it's like, that's just unbelievable that, you know, somebody could go through, you know, because I've been on the world level. It's freaking hard. And these people were winning for the longest time and had just such great careers.
Frank, is there anything else you'd like to tap Andy's brain for before we let him go?
Man, it's been so great talking to Andy. You know, I've wondered, though, if I had one more question to ask,
in all that you've achieved in the sport of wrestling, I believe that we're all given gifts, right, by God. And when I think about what's Andy Hrovat's superpower, what is that one thing that separates you from everyone else? What would you say?
Well, from other people telling me this is my superpower, I have a short-term memory. Right? But it's true, though. In wrestling, you have to have that short-term memory. You know, when I was training a lot with, Ryan Chirella at Michigan, he would always say that. He's like, dude, you could go and just get destroyed in practice and be like, I'm a world champ. And I remember the last workout, we had camps at overtime leading up to the Olympic trials. And I was like, I'm ready. I just did these hard camps. And, we had a couple practices back in Michigan and old man Chirella, being a 3-time NCAA champ himself, was putting Ryan and I through our last workout. And, for some reason we couldn't get in the Michigan room that day. So we're at Novi High School in Michigan where Ryan went. And, I just had a terrible practice. But for me, I was like, I'm already ready. It's like Ryan was beating my ass. And, his old man actually called up Sean Borman, was like, I don't know what's wrong with Andy. I don't know if he's ready. And but for me, I'm like, this practice meant nothing. Like, I've put the work in. I traveled for the last 4 years. I've done everything I could. And it's like, I still believed I was going to be the best, right? And it's like, you can't let losses linger. You can't let hard matches linger. It's like, just forget about it and just keep the path and keep moving forward. Because, and that's everything in life. It's like, don't let things just ruin yourself because you're just sitting there thinking about them for eternity. It's like, get over it, move on, and, do the best.
And to wrap things up along those same lines, what are you still missing in life? What are you working towards? What are your new goals that, you continually set for yourselves that you're hoping to achieve?
I mean, wrestling is, obviously, I'm going to say it's easy for me, right? Like, I was fortunate enough to, like we said, start with one of the best kids club in the nation, best high school, one of the best colleges, Wrestle for America, got to train in Russia, right? And that was what really sparked my coaching journey, is learning their training system and understanding how they do it. So for me, it's like, it's like a turnkey operation now to just keep producing good wrestlers, but you got to manage personalities and parents and, the ups and downs. But just personally, I just want a family. That's the number one thing I'm working on, because I wrestled so long and, I ended up having a, bad marriage and, that didn't work out. But I want kids, I want to be able to have kids and, just raise them and, get them involved in the sport. And, that's my number one thing right now.
Have you ever thought about going on The Bachelor? Get you on.
No.
No. We'll get
You
on
are
reality.
pretty. You're pretty, man.
You saved your face,
right?
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful, man. That's one of the things I take pride in is the marriage I have with my wife and finding the perfect mate for the rest of my life. So good luck on that, and I wish you well, man. Nothing's better than having a partner in crime. So I'm sure Frank can speak to that as well.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Andy. It's been a pleasure. I wish we could spend more time with you. I know you got a busy day. We've got to jump on some other things as well. But we'll love to have you back, talk more, get more into those other years of the Dynasty. We'd even get into the deep of the Heskett, rivalry between you two. But thank you for joining us. Keep doing great work out there in Texas. Good luck with the Ranger 47 Wrestling Club. And is there anything else you'd like to talk about or pitch before you bounce?
I mean, if you have me back on, that'd be amazing. This has been great. It's just awesome thinking about our past and, where we all came from. But I do have my training app coming out. I could have put it out. I didn't have it ready for the beginning of the year. I had some bugs I had to tweak out. But it's everything I learned in Russia. It's a coach's app, parent app, kid app. And there's nothing on the market like it. Most are technique-based, but mine's all goal-orientated. And it's called Base Wrestling, Battle, Athletics, Skill, and Exercise. And, I've just broken down all the different battles of the sport, which ties back to all the technique you have to learn. And it's a lot of, like I said, it's goal focused. And I'm gonna release it at the end of the high school season this year. for freestyle and Greco, and get some users so then I could have a full launch at the beginning of next season. But to me, that's one of the things that I've been really focused on for the actually last decade, because when I created it, technology was so expensive and I didn't want to take money from other people, so I just kind of slow played it, and now it's ready to release. And I'm just so happy that I could use my experiences. I've been very fortunate, with Longwood and St. Ed's and Michigan, going to Russia, that I have all this experience that I can share with people. And, I just want to have an impact, to help coaches and to help wrestlers. And, again, it goes back to Coach Urbis, being at St. Ed's, just giving everything he had to us. And, that's what I want to do for, everybody else, just be a leader, be someone who gives, and, be able to inspire people and help them. That's my number one goal in life, is just inspire people, help them, and just enjoy the process and enjoy the journey. And that's what I'm doing.
And where can people find more information on the base wrestling training system, reaching out to you, all that information? Where can they find you?
Yeah, just reach out to me on social media. The most comprehensive stuff, I just wanted a challenge a couple of years ago when I got down here. And so I just being with Joe DeSana and stuff, he always talks about, challenging yourself. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to do 100 days of wrestling, on social media. And so I basically broke up the training system in 100 days and I put it out on social media. And so it's all on my Instagram, Andy Hrovat. And so if you ever go down there, you could scroll through all the old 100 days of all the training techniques, the science behind it. It has everything. And so they could check it out there and then just DM me. And, I like reaching out to people. And so once it's out, I'll get it to everybody I can. And yeah. So I'm always open, just social media.
Send it our way. We'll get it out there, and we'll put all that information in the show notes of this episode as well, so people can find it there. But thank you, Andy. It's been a pleasure. Again, we tapped on just a fragment of the rivalry, so we got to have you back on. We got to have you back on when the base wrestling technique system is up and running. But thank you. Enjoy your day. Enjoy Texas, and keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Man, this was amazing.
Thanks, Andy. Great seeing you, brother.
Yeah, you too, Frank. Take care.
The story needs to be told just for the fact that it was a great time for high school sports. It really was.
You got the bad boys here and you got the good guys here. And then they went at it for 10 years.
It was a strong narrative with a good arc to it. And I think people could see that it wasn't going to be replicated anytime soon.
Look back on it.
You're doing a podcast on it right now.
That's how big it was, and that's what I wanted to be a part of.
At the end of the day, it was trying to help kids become their best selves at a really high level. And so from that sense, it's a story that's very American.
I think that's a good way to explain it.